Hello, I'm Kevin Captain, Community Information Director for Volusia County Government. I want to welcome everyone with today's interview with Mark Spivey. We're 6 feet away from each other, so we're going to be able to safely take our masks off. And our interpreter couple are also healthcare providers and have been vaccinated, live in the same house, so they're mask-free today for the interview. So we're here in the county's production studio in the historic courthouse in DeLand. We've discussed COVID-19 before and the mental wellness component that goes along with it. And certainly our mental health during this pandemic is just as important as our physiological health. Mark Spivey is with us today. Mark serves the community in many different roles. One as a clinical chaplain and trauma psychotherapist, and for more than 25 years he's been providing the people of Volusia County with spiritual and psychosocial care. He leads celebrations of life and memorial services and offers follow-up counseling care. Mark is also a participant in providing critical incident stress debriefings, or what we call CISDs, during individual and community traumatic life events. Currently, Mark serves at Halifax Health in Daytona Beach as the coordinator for the Center of Wellbeing, providing in-house support and psychotherapeutic care for the professional caregivers at Halifax Health. Thank you for being with us today, Mark.
Glad to be here, Kevin. Thank you.
So glad that you're here. So, Mark, 1 year into the pandemic, it was March 11th, in fact, last year. So we're as of this week, as we talk, it's been a year into the pandemic. And so we know it's not over, not yet anyway. And many of us are still struggling with being, exhausted and are we burned out? I mean, when do you think we'll get out of this melancholy?
I get asked the question, are we burned out a lot, or when did the burnout occur? In my own personal and professional opinion, it occurred 3.5 to 4 weeks after the beginning of last year's official start. Human beings, particularly Americans, don't like change, and we don't like being told we have to make changes. And so it was a huge blow to be told to stay in, shutter down. And so I think burnout has already long since occurred, and we're in different phases now of what I would consider to be grief and loss. And we can talk more about that if you'd like to.
Absolutely, let's do that, because many of us have experienced grief and loss with those that have been lost with COVID. In fact, I read in the paper today, it said 1 in 5 Americans know someone who lost the fight to COVID-19.
Yes. When you say grief or you say loss, people typically go to the death of a loved one, and that certainly is a profound loss. The loss expands with you having something like coronavirus or a pandemic or a catastrophe or even like a hurricane. You don't just lose individual lives, you lose freedoms, you lose jobs, you lose income, you lose the sense that everything's going to be all right. You lose the sense that everything's normal and life is good. So the loss is experienced on many levels, and the grief and grief reactions and the traumatic reactions, they stagger with each different person. Children have lost the capacity to go to school. People have lost the capacity to start college, graduate, attend weddings, attend funerals. So there's multiple phases to losses, and the grief that associates with that is where I think most of us are in right now. Each of us, according to his or her own skills, we're at different places along that spectrum. So I think burnout isn't even a conversation topic anymore. We are all experiencing different phases and levels of grief and trying to survive as best as we can. And again, each of us do that according to our skills, access to resources, etc.
How are you holding up during all this? Because when we're talking about grief, you of anyone, you're leading. You're there at the funerals, you're
right
there leading the memorial services, and you're helping to encourage people. And with now being into a year into it, I can't even imagine what your schedule has been like. Are you burned out?
Technically, I don't believe that it's possible for me to burn out because I was never burned on. I've done this for 41 years in one way or another. And so to me, this is a passion, it's a love, because personally, my own philosophy of life is about loss. And loss isn't always a negative thing. It's having the attitude and the ability to see the positive in the negative. And I've always been able to do that, so that's always fueled me and given me what I need to be sort of confident or calm in the midst of chaos. So my answer is a bit unique than other
Sure.
people's answer might be. I still practice enormous self-care. You know the 5 pillars I talk about in my own life.
I wanted to talk to you about that.
Yeah,
Yes, you
I
mentioned the
practice
5
those.
pillars before.
Yeah, and these are just, there's more than 5, but these are my 5 favorites. And it's hydration, nutrition, sleep, exercise or movement, and mindfulness. And as long as you practice at least 3 out of 5 of those, you can keep your body, mind, and soul operational and functional and keep a sense of equilibrium. And so you obviously need your sleep for restorative help and health. You obviously need proper nutrition. All of us are, many of us are tempted, especially during different phases of these last few months, to eat the wrong foods or comfort foods or too many of the wrong foods.
Or drink the wrong liquids.
And that's the hydration. So I always tell people, eat well and drink properly. And if you need to have a little something extra, by all means have it. But get in the necessaries first, because good nutrition and good hydration is essential to mental health and well-being. The average American's walking around sleep deprived and dehydrated, so naturally that exacerbates feelings of mental health, depression, and deficiencies, and just sadness and a sense of dread or hopelessness. And then the 4th one is the one that most find most unpopular, which is exercise or movement. You couldn't go to gyms for a while, but people don't think about simple things like parking far away from someplace, walking around the block, taking the stairs instead of the elevator. So I always recommend for people to spend 10 to 20 minutes every day of the week with sustained movement or exercise. That improves mental well-being, it improves clarity, it reduces anxiety and tension. And then mindfulness is a broad term that lets you include your sense of spirituality. For some people, spirituality is church or organized religion, but for many, spirituality is meditation, music, walking on the beach, being near water, games, sports. There's all kinds of ways to meet your spiritual needs. And so those 5 pillars are good ways and places for you to start when practicing good self-care.
You had mentioned that even previous to one of the benefits that we have in living in Volusia County is we have the 47 miles of some of the most beautiful beaches.
Yes.
We have, I think, nearly 60 miles of trails.
Yes.
So that staying active component of the 5 pillars you're talking about, we need to get out and enjoy that.
I say this regularly, and I know it falls on ears that are tired, but the truth of the matter is, if we would spend more time with nature and practice, at least on our own level, a portion of these 5 pillars, we would need less medications and we would really do ourselves a great justice. I realize it's very easy for us to get busy and to simply take the pill or slug the liquor. That's a natural tendency. It's very human for us to do it. But if you can do any of the 5, especially 3 out of the 5, on any level, if you can't, you say, oh, Mark, well, I can't do 20 minutes, do 10. Do 10 minutes.
Start somewhere.
Yeah, start somewhere. Start slow, start small. Don't overwhelm yourself. The key is just start. Just start doing better on one. Sleep is a big one. A lot of people,
You've often said that we underestimate sleep.
They underestimate the power of it and the value of it, and they don't get regular sleep. And a lot of people, myself included, we work long hours, and so we don't get much time to ourselves. So we get home, let's say it's 9 o'clock at night, and we really ought to go right to bed, but we feel cheated if we don't have some downtime. So we're up, screen time, looking at, and before we know it, it's 1 a.m., and we have to get up at 7.
Geez, sounds like my house.
Well, it's an easy thing to do because
it is.
We feel we've earned the right for this, and then the next morning we're grumbling and we're angry and we're mad that we did it, and we say we're not going to do it again, but we do. It's just we get in these little ruts, and that's a survival mode. But if you want to thrive, alter your daily schedule so that it works, and create a routine that you can actually keep. And try it for at least 7 to 10 days and watch your mental health and well-being improve. You will not only feel physically better, you'll have a more improved outlook on the future. You'll feel more hopeful. and you'll have less need for other things that aren't as healthy for you during coping with these typical times.
Good advice. Start small. So let's talk about the vaccines for a second, because we now have a third manufacturer, Johnson & Johnson. So we're going to probably see more and more ramping up of the vaccine deployments. And these companies, they're not just making the vaccine for Volusia County. They're in fact making them for the entire globe, because it's a worldwide pandemic. And since the beginning, the county started with the Eventbrite registration process. Now we've moved to use the state's ShareCare registration process, which is where they create the list and you sign up. But we also now have CVS and Publix and Winn-Dixie and the Veterans Affairs Office. So there's different ways to get the vaccine, but still people have difficulty getting on the list or being able to get their appointment, and it's frustrating, and it's particularly frustrating for some of our elderly or vulnerable population who really need to get the vaccine. And the natural tendency is for us to think, well, there's something wrong with the system, or it's slowing down, or it's not fair. But we know that because it's a worldwide issue, we're all trying to do the best we can, and it's never really been done before.
Right.
So what's your advice to people who want to pull their hair out with just trying to get that vaccine? Because we know it's a matter of when, not if, that they're going to get it.
My advice is the same advice I give for people who are excited about the new iPhone, or who are excited about getting their roof repaired after 2 years of hurricane waiting. The old expression, hurry up and wait, is not new to us. There are many things that we have to teach ourselves that we wait for. Many people wait for Black Friday, stores to open. So we know how to do it.
Yes.
It's just that we feel a sense of frustration. So I'll remind people that the key is patience and persistence. Just be patient, just be persistent, and practice good mental health and time management, and eventually your time will come.
It's just only a matter of time.
Yeah, it really is a matter of time.
When, not if, right?
And there's a lot of, in my area, in the Volusia County area, there's a lot of groups that are now banding together, acting as volunteer typers and callers to try and get vaccination appointments for people that don't have access. And so we're pulling together as a community and helping each other, because many people, it isn't just a matter of frustration, they don't have the technical skills to know how to get into the system.
Right.
So people are coming forward and helping, and it's all a work in progress.
It is, and the good thing with here in Volusia County, if somebody doesn't have internet access, they can call the Citizens Information Center in our emergency management division. So there's different routes to get that access.
Yeah.
So we know that it affects everybody, not just the elderly population, our middle-aged population, but also our adolescents and our children. And we're going to be coming up on graduations again soon.
Yes.
And that's, for imagine, you're graduating high school, you want to have a ceremony, but we're still needing to follow CDC guidelines, and we still want to do the right thing. And fortunately, here in Volusia County, we have the fortunate privilege of having the Ocean Center and still being able to do the graduations. But still, it's still stressful because it's not normal.
Right.
You had mentioned once before about it was a beautiful metaphor about candles, and it had to do with children and hope. Would you mind sharing that again?
Sure. There's 4 candles, and they're burning in a room, and they're burning softly, and there's a nice ambiance of peace and calmness in the room. The first candle is called peace, and the candle speaks and says, there isn't much peace right now in the world. People are conflictual, they're angry, they're hurting one another. I don't really think that I need to keep shining. And so the candle of peace puts itself out. The next candle is thinking and says, my name is faith. And a lot of people today, they don't really practice faith or have faith, not in their government, not in their neighbors, not even in themselves. I don't really think there's much of a need for me to be lit either. So the candle puts itself out. The next candle is love, and love chimes in and says, people forget the importance of love. They have a hard time loving their neighbor, even loving themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I don't see a need for me to burn either, and extinguishes itself. Just then a little girl walks into the room and she sees the 3 candles out and only 1 lit, and she gets very disturbed and she says, "Wait a minute, guys. You told me you would always stay there lit and ready for me when I needed you. What's going on?" And the 4th candle, Hope, says, "As long as I am lit, you can relight the other 3. And she smiled. And so the idea of hope is that hope can relight love, hope can relight faith, and hope can relight peace. Often hope is abandoned by us, but hope doesn't leave us. And I have an acronym that I sometimes use when I go a little bit deeper in this of hope, HOPE, and the H stands for healing, not hurting. And O stands for opportunity, not obstacle. P stands for persistence, not problems. And E stands for experience, as opposed to exhausted or exhaustion.
That's great.
And so the emphasis is on let's work to heal ourselves and others. Let's work for seeing opportunities where there are obstacles. And let's work for persistence or perseverance where instead of focusing on problems. And then, of course, let's take the experience that we're getting from this rehearsal that we're going through in life instead of looking at the exhaustion. We're all tired on different levels. But with that fatigue comes experience that we can use not just now, but for the next place that we go in life. Someone asked me a couple days ago about, is the grass really greener? And I said, no, there is no green grass. It's all brown.
It's a common metaphor,
Yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
all brown. There are problems everywhere you go. The key is not the grass. The key is the attitude. The attitude of whether or not you are a healer or a herder. So you can survive anything if your attitude is in the right place. And so this little parable, which is not new to me, it's been around for a long time, is often used as a reminder that hope can extinguish our fears and give us a sense of relighting love and peace and faith in the world.
Those 2 H's are great examples with what we're going through, the hope and the healing. And when we talk about the healing, you know, you have the privilege of working in the hospital, so you're working with all of the different types of clinicians and
Yes.
caregivers, healers. And you know, earlier when we introduced the topic of burnout, if there's anybody who's burned out or getting burned out, it's got to be those healthcare workers.
Yeah.
What's it like right now in the hospital setting, and how is the burnout going? Is it a real thing? Is it getting better? What's it like?
It's getting better. It's a real thing. It's getting better. Again, I don't use the word burnout. We use the word exhaustion. And I will share with you my own experience in the hospital systems. There's a lot of exhaustion, not simply with caring for COVID patients and COVID-related issues, but a lot of exhaustion from clinicians regarding the public's unwillingness to take responsibility for their own health care. And practicing rather risky or somewhat precarious behavior. And so, as you know, clinicians, one of the big jobs is to always educate, reinforce. And so there's a lot of frustration and fatigue that comes with seeing people coming in who don't really need to be there had they simply practiced safer approaches and taken more care and been less careless. And so we see an awful lot of that. But by all means, the hospitals are functioning fine, very well. We have no overload problems. Everything's going better than expected.
And so we did the right thing by early on closing some things down
Yes.
to suppress that, flatten the curve is what
Yes.
we said. One of the things that, you know, a lot of discussion has been had about the pandemic has been from personal living to business to healthcare,
Yes.
even in the hospital, is how we've had to reinvent ourselves and completely do something different. And amidst the sort of negativity that surrounds the pandemic, we've also seen at the same time, we see the best in people that have
Right.
come out. What have you been seeing in the hospital that you can share that can make us feel good about the adversity? There's always something positive that comes out of the adversity.
Yeah, I would go so far, Kevin, as to say that the obstacle is the way through, that we only grow when we're forced to struggle.
Isn't that true?
And interestingly, of course, and naturally, most people don't have skills for adversity. They don't want to have to worry about that. They want things to be smooth and calm and
Who
nice
likes change,
and
right?
peaceful. Right.
Nobody.
Yeah, we don't want anything to be, we want a nice, smooth, easy, peaceful, smooth sailing life. And I'll often say to people, I'll say, well, so what you're asking for is a nice, smooth, calm, and they say, oh yes, that's what I want. And I'll say, well, come over here, and I'll take them over to one of the trauma bays, and I'll hook up the EKG to them, and I'll show it to them, and of course you got the sinus rhythm, and I'll ask them, what is that? And of course they're nurses, and I'll say, well, that's sinus rhythm, and so then I'll take it off, and then beep, that flat line, nice and smooth, and I'll say, well, what's that? And they'll say, well, that's a flat line. I say, well, what's that mean? And then they'll say, well, that means that you're deceased, you're dead. I said, you've just answered your question. The point is, life is supposed to be about the ups and the downs. If you ever doubt for a moment that life is supposed to be nice and smooth and easy and calm, just take your finger and feel your heartbeat, or check your carotid, and that's proof that life's about the ups and the downs. That's how you know you're alive. Anything else is a flat line. Yeah. So to even want that kind of peace, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because you're not really alive. The trick is, you can't climb the mountain unless it's got rugged something to hold on to. If it's smooth, you can't climb it. So we grow in the face of obstacle and adversity, and people don't like it, but once they adapt to it and become creative, they get better, and they surprise themselves at how creative and inventive they are, and how resilient they are, and how quickly they can become better at doing what they thought they couldn't do, and they grow. And they see things differently, and they make changes in their lives, and they're almost glad after the fact that they were given that challenge, because now they're ready for the next one. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense. We sometimes need to go through those perils, that adversity, to become that's what shapes us as human beings.
And
right?
As Floridians, whether you're native or you're new to the area, hurricanes teach us that every year.
Sure.
You know, we see it coming, we make a plan, and each of us have different attitudes. Some have faith, some have fear, but that it trains us. It trains us for adversity. We know how to survive it. We realize there's going to be waiting, and it's going to be frustrating, but we adapt to it, and we get good at it. And we're doing the same thing here with just a different kind of hurricane, a different kind of storm. We are
different, and we're going to be coming up on a hurricane season again here, too.
It's going
to be still lingering remnants of a pandemic.
Yes.
The new hurricane season. You know, you mentioned too about Floridians, and as a Volusia County resident yourself, you've been here a long time.
I'm a native. I was born right here.
You were born probably right in Halifax,
Hospital.
right?
Yeah. I was born here.
So as a society in a community in Volusia, how should we be feeling right now? Now that it's been a year,
right,
and we know that everyone's been saying it's kind of the beginning of the end. So how should we be feeling?
Well, you know, that's a great question, but it's a trick question. How should we be feeling? You know what I say about should? Don't use the word, you'll should all over yourself. So you got to be careful about that should.
Sure.
Everyone feels differently about it. I can tell you how I feel about it. I'm optimistic. People say, Mark, isn't this horrible? And they don't like my answer, but then if I unpack it and they don't get mad and walk away and listen, then they might say, okay, well, that makes sense.
But maybe that's why they ask you.
It could very well be, because I think what's happened to us is it's trouble, it's problematic, it's tragic, but there's always a silver lining. It's also a blessing and rehearsal and opportunity. We have seen the very best come out of us, and it's prepared us in ways that perhaps simple things could not have prepared us for. And so it's not that I wake up each day and invite trouble, but I'm ready for it, because I know that it's going to teach me something, and I'm going to learn valuable lessons from it.
So what a great answer, and a great way to be
I wasn't going to let you trick me with that should question.
But we do need to consciously be aware of how we think, because our minds, isn't it human evolution? Our minds just automatically revert to the negative.
Yes. Yeah.
So
we're too good at that, unfortunately.
We all are, right? So the last year, we've had the pandemic, we've had social unrest, we've had presidential politics, which some of that still lingers.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you could argue that we have 5 different generations that are living today, all of whom sort of get their news in a different platform or accommodation thereof. And we're bombarded today by news everywhere, whether it's the media, newspaper, social media. And the social media piece, we've seen it gives rise to a lot of negative commentary, and that's another platform that can bring us down. What's your advice to people when they want to go and get news and they want to glean information to arm themselves with info, but yet you have all these platforms out there and so much of it is twisted in a negative format? How do we stay positive knowing that all these outlets are maybe confusing and conflicting the message when it's not supposed to?
Oh, I have another acronym for you.
Of course you do.
You know, I have a little talk I give called Being Calm in Chaos. And calm, C-A-L-M, the C stands for control what you can in your life. And one of the things we can control is our sources of stimuli and screen time. So I always recommend select 1, or if you must, 2 credible sources of information and time yourself on getting your information. Don't spend all day. Simply allow yourself a small amount of time, get your information, and move on. So the C in the CALM acronym is control what you can, and amongst that, I'll often tell people, unplug yourself from unnecessary news and stimulation. It's a lot like a soap opera. It won't change a whole much each day. You just pick it,
pretty much the same.
And your neighbors will tell you anyway. So unplug yourself. We are very technologically connected, and we don't think about it, but it produces stress, anxiety, insomnia. It disturbs our circadian rhythm, and so it's good to have all of these resources, but they need to work for us instead of us working for them. And it's always good to be mindful about that. So that's the C in CALM, control what you can. Do you want to know what the rest of it is?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Don't leave me in suspense.
I was going to leave you. So the A is assess your emotions. Always be aware of how you're feeling, whether you're angry, frustrated, envious, confused, hurt, sad, happy. Assess your emotions and your feelings. Be mindful and be aware of how you're feeling at all times, especially in a crisis. And don't run from them. Don't try and suppress them. Embrace them. And remind yourself, it's all right to feel this way. It's okay to feel this way. It's temporary. It won't last. And if it does last, then when you go a little bit further down to L, the next one, let others help you. There's people that are standing by, ready to help at all times.
Because a lot of us refuse help.
A lot of us don't want it because we think that help means we're vulnerable, we're weak, we're failures. And many of us are just private people, and we're afraid that how it's going to get out. And so I understand all of those, and those are all real concerns. But in the end, we're interdependent, whether we like it or not. If I get hurt in a car accident, if I'm a very private person, if I'm a recluse, I'm going to need emergency care. I'm going to have to depend on someone else to help me and force myself to let them in. And so it's very similar with mental illness and mental wellness and mental health and well-being, that there are others that want to help and can keep it confidential and private. And then the M is manage your moods, manage your emotions. And what I mean by that is, don't let anybody else tell you how to feel or think. It's your job to decide how you feel. An example would be, you make me so sick, or you make me tired. Well, technically, I can't make you feel anything. It's your job to feel.
Sure.
So managing our moods is take responsibility for how you feel, and you decide how you feel about what's happening. And it's a nice, crisp way of keeping boundaries. It takes some practice to manage your moods, but once you get it down, your sense of well-being improves.
You know, you mentioned help and asking for help, and particularly even though we're seeing the beginning of the end and things are going to improve with the pandemic, there's still help available in many sources here in Volusia County.
Yes.
For mental health resources if someone's struggling. And that really plays into what you go and do every day at
Yes.
work. And
Yes.
you're dealing with it. And what's your day look like? And what do you tell people when you sense that they might not ask for help, but maybe they need a referral, or how do you refer? How do you engage in that conversation?
Well, you're asking a very good question, and I'll give you a specific Mark answer. This may not be everyone else's answer. I'm pretty proactive, so as opposed to waiting for someone to come to me when they're ready, they may be in desperate crisis but not know how. And if I can sense that, I'll approach them. So I tend to be a little bit more proactive, and I just tap them on the shoulder and remind them, I'm here, we're here, just in case. Mm-hmm. And sometimes just knowing that they have access is all they need.
And that's good for all of us as people to know if we see, a colleague, a neighbor, a friend that might be struggling, we should say something.
Yes.
We should reach out and help.
Yeah. Most of us, and I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but most human beings are aware, we have an intuitive sense when somebody else is not okay or not right, but we rarely explore it. Mm-hmm. We have societal norms where we just say, how are you? The person says fine, and we walk on. But that's not true, and we know it, but the fact is we don't want to stop and go deeper. Sometimes it's important to go deeper. It's tricky to know when to do that. Many people walk around today deeply wounded and deeply troubled and very upset and feeling rejected and frightened, and that's a sad truth. But they don't know how to reach out, and they don't know what to do, and they're scared to reach out because they're afraid of what's going to happen if they do.
Because of the stigma associated with mental health. Period.
So I like to, and it's just a me thing, I like to reach out. But I like to do it privately, and I like to do it cautiously so that they don't feel exposed, but they feel like there is someone that cares and there is help if and when you're ready.
Right.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate again, I mean, there's plenty of mental health resources right here.
There's no scarcity of
County.
it.
Yes.
The challenge is for people to make the decision. For example, I see anywhere from 8 to 15 people a day, and then later on, some of them will say to me, I put off coming to this appointment for 3 months, 3 weeks.
Finally going to do it.
Yeah, and I'll ask them why out of curiosity, and the answer is always the same: fear, afraid of what you'd think, afraid of what my family would think, embarrassed. Just a sense of I'm embarrassed that I can't handle things. Well, and I reassure them that we're all human and we all have challenges, and this is all what it means to be human.
Hey, when you say fear, I remember an acronym. Can I
Do
say
you?
an acronym?
Yes.
Fear, I remember it, fantasizing emotions appearing real.
Yeah.
And that's fear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It is not a big revelation for me to say out loud that many people in our country are fear-driven. They live their lives based on a fear model. Afraid of what people think, afraid of not getting the job, afraid of quitting the job, afraid of trying another job. So fear becomes their primary motivator, whereas some live on faith. And by faith, I don't mean organized religion. I mean faith in themselves, faith that things will get better. They have faith that if they step out, there will be opportunities. And so which one are you is always the question. Right. And each of us, maybe we have a little bit of both. But fear is a major player in, it to me is the real dirty F word, fear. Because it immobilizes and paralyzes us in ways that it doesn't have to. If we learn how to be non-attached and release and allow feelings to come in and come out, we can get a perspective on ourselves. All of us have a little roommate in our head, that little inner narrator that's always yapping and isn't always right. And so we can learn how to pay attention to the narrator, pay attention to our little roommate, and stand over here and gain some perspective on fear and how to learn how to love, open our hearts, and release. It's scary at first, but once we master it, we'll never go back. And that's another whole talk in and of itself.
Well, and that's probably another half hour with Mark, or is it an hour with Mark? What do we? If you're seeing 15 patients a day,
that's a 90-minute talk. Yeah, that's a 90-minute talk.
Well, as we close, Mark, what is your message to Volusia County residents particularly when we talk about our attitudes during the pandemic, when the world feels upside down all the way around us? How do we stay positive and live a healthy life and keeping our mental health?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me this, and I had a lot of answers, so I just wrote down a few. so that I wouldn't ramble. So in other words, I'd say be mindful. Be mindful not just of what's happening in the world at large, what's happening in our country, what's happening in your community, but be mindful of your family, be mindful of your own feelings, be mindful of your expectations. Be sensible, common practical sense. My grandfather used to say, wash your hands, don't go into some place if you're sick. Common sense. And these are things we now have learned from coronavirus, but most of us have heard this all of our lives. So just use common everyday sense about life and practice common sense. Learn how to, wait your turn, so to speak. You can't butt in line. Don't be impatient. Important. Everyone has to wait. That's the way the world's designed. Eventually, you'll get there, and before you know it, you'll be handled. Be calm, and I already gave you that an acronym.
Yes.
Control what you can, assess your feelings, and let others help you, and manage your moods. Take responsibility for your role in what's going on. And then the last thing I would suggest, which really is close to my heart, is be civil. We're living in a time where incivility is really at an all-time high. We're discourteous to one another. Civility has lost its place, particularly in what we consider to be crisis mode. Mm-hmm. So I recommend to people, just practice patience, common thank you, polite things, civility, be courteous, have good manners, because again, as my grandfather used to always teach me, this too shall pass. We're going to be all right. We're already better. We're already a whole lot better, and it's just each day we see better and better and better, and this goes back again to attitude. People see what they want to see. So if your attitude is one of fear, you're going to see what's not working. Instead, you have an attitude of faith. You see what is working in your life. Focus on what's right, not what's wrong, and change the way you think and feel as you move forward, because improvement is all around us. We just have to see it.
Great advice, Mark. It's about counting our blessings, right?
Absolutely. Well, I hated to say that. That sounds kind of cliche, but it is true.
It is.
It is true.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you're busy. It's thank you for
My
getting
pleasure,
some
Kat.
time
My pleasure.
to come and talk with us today, and for sharing your expertise with our audience, and for what you do at Halifax, and for patients and for the professional caregivers and clinicians. I'm sure they love talking to you, and they must feel a whole heck of a lot better after talking to you every day. So,
I love doing it.
I bet you do. It shows. Well, thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Kevin.
With that, we'll close today's interview. Take care, stay safe, and help your neighbors.